Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome to Hour 3, Day 3 of this live development session for my space game Nebulous. In the last video, there was a pretty solid breakthrough with creating the actual active scanning ring that the player decides through their choice of slider value through the UI. It's hanging up for a second. I was going to show that off, but now it's taking a sec to compile here. So if I create some ring here, I'm just going to go in here and cheat up the economy to like 75. And I click scan. There's actually an object that represents the scan that shoots out, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, hate to break it to you, but I think it's pretty cool. So what we're gonna have to do is figure out a way to not go like this, because this probably will tank the frame rates in the long run. But I'm gonna spend all the money anyway. Okay, so a few things that need to happen for this. I have to change the actual prefab's ring data to actually have the same amount of points as the scanning radius ring, which I had set up at 12 points. So I'm going to match those. And I'm pretty sure that will fix the issue that happened at the end of the last video where the ring could not go all the way up to 360 degrees properly. The other issue might be that it's not two-sided. So I'll have to see exactly what's going on here. So the goal was to just go max 360. And I had zoomed out and then jank up the economy. And then when I come back over here, it's going to do this unfortunate thing where it resets it. Something like this. Alright, so if I scan this, so the scan works radially, but it's rendering one-sided, so since there's a shader graph on it, I might be able to say render two-sided. Under its I thought it was in here somewhere, but it might not be. Oh shoot, I thought it was gonna give me the ability to set it to two-sided. I thought it was going to. Maybe that's on the object. Maybe it's on the material. So here it is, double-sided. Let's see if I can change it outside of play mode. Okay, enabled. Weird. Maybe was it right there? I just didn't see it or something. Not sure. So let's save this. Jump back over to the game view and take a look at whether or not the scan will show up correctly. So here we are. Let's make sure we change our economy to like 500 and show up over here. And it's got to reset it or whatever. Oops, it's not resetting the display. Oh, you know what? I have to change the value. Okay. And let's see, just something like this so we can make it look like it's radial. And it needs to be maxed. And I need to fix that clamp so it doesn't stop at 355, it goes all the way to 360. Give it a little bit of intensity and then scan and see if it's double-sided. And it was double-sided for a split second. But it technically works. If you jump up the size and tweak the economy again. Oh, it's gonna make me redo it though. It's got that weird blind spot in it, but it and something's messed up here. It's not updating the economy properly. But alright, so there's a few things it needs. It's gonna need... I'm gonna have to zoom out. So I have a pan camera here. I'm also going to set up a zoom camera. I'll just stick it in here. And this is going to need access to the player input system, because I've got to subscribe to player input trying to remember which ones I should subscribe to. Pretty sure I need to say actions, but this is going to depend on the action map, current action map. And the zooming has to occur at every tier. So I have to do something I did a while back, and I have to like say switch current action map to the name of the action map. And I did do that in another piece of code, which was this one. So I have this action map name string, which is kind of making me want to make an enum for this. And I could just use the enum for the values. Although the enum would devolve into an integer, and in fact, I actually want the string for this one. So I'm just going to copy this whole array here, place it here, and I have to do the same exact thing more or less and say for int I less than action map names length. The player input needs to switch to action map names, whoops, action map names at I. Player input switch current action map names at I. Then using that particular input dot action or current action map dot actions. And then I have to actually let me see how I did this in the other one. Current action map, and it is just an array. Oh, current action map accessed as an array. And you can get its action from the action map. Is that how that works? Okay. So you come in here and I have to pick a name, and the name is like player zooms camera. Or I guess, okay, so player zooms camera in, and player zooms camera out. And when it starts, we have to add something to it. And it has a context, pretty sure. But more or less, we do this. And we can subscribe the actions that are supposed to happen whenever the player zooms in or out. And that action is to basically just say transform dot translate vector3 back, and make sure it knows it's in its own local space. So space.local space.self, and it will translate backwards. And I might need a damper, but let's try time to delta time. And more or less, it's the same exact thing here, it's just camera def forward in its local space. So player zooms camera in, player zooms camera out. So that needs to be created on each tier of the input setup. So the star system needs a new action called player zooms camera. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Alright, player zooms camera. Oh, I have an in and out separate. So player zooms camera in, and that is a mouse control. So I have to swap the action type to be a value, and it's a just counts as an axis. And the binding is zooming in would be scroll up. And it's that simple. So I'm going to copy this one. Oh, and actually I need to revert that because I might as well. Can I cut this? I'm going to cut it and put it in here. Because the star system only is. Oh, no, the star system can zoom in. Okay. Derp-de-derp. So we'll duplicate this one. And we'll change it to, say, out. And same thing, value axis, but it's the scroll down. And so now we can Let me see if I can duplicate two of these at the same time. Ah, shoot. Okay, just copy them. Paste them in here. It's technically defined correctly. So now every separate view can zoom. And have the zoom, right now it's set up on delta time. So we will see how fast it is, but I'm very likely going to just have to add a variable to oh, I didn't put the component on the main camera. Alright, moment of truth. Let's see how this zooming works. There's also got to be like a max zoom value that if the player ever gets there, it just translates them to a different. Okay, so it's working. It's just backwards. Like, and it's way too slow. So I'm gonna have to expose a public float. You can just call it zoom speed. And these are backwards, apparently. So we'll flip these. And then we also have to multiply this by zoom speed. And we can tweak just how precise the translation is every time the player scrolls the mouse wheel. And we can set that to something good using the play mode. Okay, so we'll set it to 1, and see, it's pretty slow, so we'll set it to 5. It's a little better. I'm thinking like 25 though. It's probably good. Oops, 25, please. Okay, that's alright. Okay, so I'm looking at like 125. Okay, see, that's feasible. And then if you get like far enough, it's supposed to zoom you out. Ah, look at that though. So it zooms out the camera. Okay. So I have to revert the camera in the event I change tiers. So zoom speed being at 125 makes sense. But now if let's see, player galaxy generation, does this have all my like code to do this? Enter and exit codes, yeah. Each of these is gonna have to be tweaked. Okay, so here's interesting. I can just say find action map. I have to switch to each of these. Out of curiosity, let me see if I can do this. So instead of saying current action map, I want to say player input at find action map. Input.actions at find action map. Now whatever, it's working. Slightly better ways to do things Makes some sense though. Alright, so I've got the zoom, and I've got to make it to where anytime I zoom in and out using this, the camera has to reset to a default position. So basically player data is going to have to get public of vector3. Let's say default camera position. And then more or less all that has to happen is here we have to remember to say camera.main gets set to that default position. So we're going to want to take a look at zoom camera. Does this, I guess zoom camera could, but it's technically a separate component. So if I close galaxy generation and click on game and create a new script, it's just an initializer. Set default camera position. It's pretty straightforward. It's just going to on start take player data and set its default camera position equal to transform.position. And then it's going to say get component set, or let's see here, remove component, so game object dot remove just have a remove component. Is there the impression I could spell that component? The idea is I just want this component to remove itself after iteration or after initialization. So then you say destroy this. Okay. This is all I wanted to do, and I wanted to get off the camera. So now the camera's position will sit tight, and even if I zoom out, if I switch tiers, it will revert it to tier, or it will revert it to the default position. So to do this, we have to say camera.main.transform.position equals player data.default camera position. And we just have to go through and excuse me, put this in all of the Galaxy generated enter and exit codes. Wait a minute, this is confusing. Okay, this one belongs in here. Exit star system to star cluster. enter selected star system from star cluster. And the last should be the nebula. And that will keep the camera from sticking to the far zoom when it switches tiers. Alright, so let's take a look at this, see how it works. I didn't change any references, I just added the code to check for zooming, actually. So if I zoom out, that's safe, and if I zoom in, that's safe. And I can zoom in way too far. So I might have to do like a min-max zoom or something. If I zoom out pretty far, but then I zoom out to the next tier, it's still in the wrong spot. Oh, is it not says the main? It is says the main camera. Set default camera position, maybe. Is screwing it up, let me check. So for some reason the that also like scrolled out twice. So that was 5.5, 5.5. If I zoom out though, it should zoom out to 5.5, and it zooms into 5.5. It's almost like I forgot one. Sorry, I'm not sure why this is doing this. So, I might have to use the debugger because I don't know what's going on. So zooming in works. So enter selected star. Let me see if it's like not saved or something. No, it's all saved. Enter selected star system from star cluster is working. So zooming out is broken, but zooming out is broken. Zooming in is not broken. Okay, let me see if it's just a button problem. Okay, so these were still broken. Okay, but after changing, I can't imagine that's going to be everything. Oh, you know what? I think I'm understanding what it is. I'm putting them inside of these check for default stuff. And that's only specific to if there's an active selection. It doesn't matter if there is or is not an active selection. I'm rather sure. Anytime the action is fired, it should just zoom in and out properly. So this is kind of the same thing, it doesn't matter. This is what matters. It's not conditional on the current active selection. Alright, so now let's see if it's going to work correctly. It's just it's a little piece of nuance, but having those nuances in the game will the players appreciate it subconsciously. Okay, so I'm zoomed out. Now if I zoom out to the next tier, I should go to the default position. Okay, and I do. Same thing, if I zoom out, I should go to default. I do. If I zoom out, I should go to the default of the galaxy view. By the same token, if I zoom out, click on the nebula, zoom in, it's not zoomed out. Okay, good. Same thing here. Same thing here. Into the system. But then I can zoom out in the system and set up a scan if I want to. As long as it's just cheap enough. Throw scan up. Which again, it's not like the coolest, it doesn't have the coolest graphics ever, but I just like how it can actually fire out a couple scans. The problem though is, every time I click this, you know what I'm doing? Every time I click the scan, it's updating the total economy. But it's not updating the displayed total economy. So that is something that I've got to sort out here real quick. Which that was under, let me see here. I believe that was under active scanning elements. And so the button is lowering the total economy. And then I had to probably add in the fact that player data's dot displayed total economy needs to equal the player data dot total economy. Just so it's on the same page. It also needs to basically clear the scanning values. So scanning frequency, scanning angle, and scanning radius all need to be set to 0. So scanning radius dot value equals 0. Scanning angle dot value dot x equals 0. And scanning angle dot value dot y equals 0. And then scanning frequency dot value equals 0. It's not happy with this one though. Yeah, so I was messing this up last time also. Yeah, this is scanning angle dot like min value. Min value, max value. So now it will make sure to readjust the economy after a button press. And it'll do that whole thing where it'll force a rebuild, basically. But it also might not. I might have to scan down the ring manually. So let's see how it works. Okay, so now it goes to 0. It didn't do the scan though. Okay, so we need to instantiate first so it gets the scanning values before they get reset, I think. That way it doesn't screw up our scanner, or active scan. Well, that's not cool. Darn it. I guess if I change because I changed the values, it comes through as a event. Well, shoot. It's looking like this. And then I run a scan. It's going to turn it off. Oh, no, it's not going to turn it off this time. If I do this and I run a scan and I switch to something else, and I switch back, is the economy matched properly? This one costs like 2, 3, whatever. Now we shoot this off. Okay, so it's gotta like recalculate them or whatever after the scan. Or like I mean, yeah, more or less needs to set the sliders to 0 without triggering them, which is a little weird. I wonder if I get, is there a change value? Let me see if there's a change value. I don't want to unregister that. Set value without notifying. Is my best guess. And this should essentially just make the actual toggles reset to 0. This one's a little different. Just a vector 2. Okay, how about maybe now it will work. This will not. This will change them without breaking the other scan, hopefully. And if they're set to 0, hopefully the other ring will go away too for the scan that's actually flying through space. Alright, so this should do a couple things. Let's just see what happens. That's stuck, but it didn't reset the values. See, in this instance, the total cost of the scan is 29, and the total economy is less than that, so something's messing up. I shouldn't be able to... Yeah, something's messed up in that regard, too. I shouldn't be able to basically I have to do my check for... Well, okay, another thing though is that this didn't work. So basically, like, I'm not exactly sure. So that just didn't work. Yeah, darn, I don't know. It seems self-explanatory that set value without notify should work, but... Man, that was really weird. You would have to wait... Man, the problem is that when the player launches the scan... Okay, so... Now I have to do like an if here. So if player data.total economy minus player data.total cost of active scans. This should actually help. Is less than 0. We have to do the stuff up above where we... So I'm not sure why this isn't working. Basically just run this stuff. Alright, so this should fix that. And this will force the user to change the ring. The only other thing we need to do, I would imagine, is the active scanning ring needs to have its radius updated. Would be the last thing. So player data dot active scanning radius object dot update. Oh no, we have to say get component. Scanning radius dot update scanning radius to 0 float. And that will force the player to readjust the scanner to get a result. So I can see this going both ways for the players. I can see them being annoyed that it has to reset, and I can see them being grateful that it has to reset, so it's a little strange in that regard. I don't think I have to add anything new, though. So in this instance, I shouldn't have any more funkiness whenever I decide to set up a scanning arc. Okay, so if I drain it down with a kind of pricey scan, what should happen here is because I have 24, the cost of the scan is this much, and it's always subtracting from this much. So if I actually run the scan, the idea is that the next scan, if I make it right on point here, okay, so if I just bump it up so it's right on the money and run the scan, it should actually say that the next scan will be too big. And it does. And okay, so that all worked. So now I can't run another scan because it's too expensive to run that same scan. But what I can do is lower the radius, and it will just smartly know what to do. So if I scan again, it'll say it again. Okay, so that's working now properly. That's how I want it to work. So the only problem here would be that the player... So I'm doing the courtesy thing and I'm turning off the scanner, but I'm still not sure if that's the best thing to do. I can see the player wanting to keep the scanner, and I can see them not wanting to keep the scanner, so I really don't know which one to do at this point. We'll see what happens though, because now that's interesting. It'll scan out to a radius that is not on the screen. So I leave and then come back. This is properly set up so that if I spend the money, do the scan and leave, it'll say how much. So that kind of makes me want to leave honestly, it kind of makes me want to leave the scanning ring out there. Because it's clear in that case that there's an active scan in progress, essentially. This is almost getting into the point where we can have a clear scanner button. That way, if we do a scan, I'm also considering making the default scan frequency 1. That might not be a bad idea. Alright, so if we run a scan, the next one will be too expensive, but at least I can still see if I want to run like another scan like this. And then right when it's there, run it. But then I can deselect if I want to. Or if I don't want to think about it, I can just set the radius to 0. And it doesn't matter. And if I need to come back to it, I'm almost considering setting up a default. I'm not really sure. Default frequency of 1 makes sense though. And spreading the angle's initial arc makes some sense because then you can just like kind of get a better idea of where you want to put the scan, and then if you want to make it bigger, you can. So that's not bad either. Okay, so let me see here. I'm going to try and set that up. And I think I can set those up through the UI builder. It will default the frequency slider to say that its low value is 1. And then it's always at least a 1. Or you can always turn it down to like 1. And then I kind of want to make it an int slider. for less choppy frequency selection, but the player would, essentially it'd be cool to give the player like 9 or 10 frequency tiers instead of a floating point tier. And that kind of takes away them having, there's a lot of redundant frequencies if I'm using floating points compared to if each frequency has like a certain layer that it can discover that makes it a little different as opposed to a whole random range of them. So like, but then it scales different, so I'm just gonna leave it as a float, but I'm wary of that issue where the float can make the player kind of have some analysis paralysis. But setting that to 1, I'm gonna give this a default starting angle of like negative 25, 25. And that'll give us a default starting arc. And the default radius, I'm fine with that being 0 still. So that should lighten up the handling the scanning system a little bit. Oh, this didn't work though. This worked. Okay. Okay, so that's what's weird. Oh no, I guess it's accurate. Or wait a minute. So if I scan this, I should stick to 14. If I scan again, it should go down. Okay, it's working. And I don't know why it's doing this double count here. It's going from -1 to 0 to 0 to 1. It's a little weird. It's like checking if it's... I'm not sure why that's doing that, but... Alright, so... Uh-oh, and it's defaulting it. Okay, so let me see here. So is this just in here? I can just say... So they defaulted... Alright, so they're defaulting proper, or they're almost defaulting properly. They're resetting to 0 on start, which actually I think it just did that. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. But then when I change it to 1, it knows where it's at. Which has to do with the initialization of the active scanning element, actually. Or it must be in the spawn system. I am not sure. I'm going to have to figure something out for that. Alright, well, that's 1 hour for this video. I'm still grinding along here, figuring out how to work out all the kinks for the scanning system, but slowly but surely I'm still making progress with this system. I've got to sort out this kink that is making this not default to 1 properly, and fix this one so it'll default to its angle properly. So I've got a couple, somewhere I've got to go fix those defaults, but once I get those defaults fixed, the scanning system will feel a little smoother for the user. That way they don't have to have a scanner selected at every moment. They can always just deactivate the scanner. Alright, so thank you for watching the video up to this point, and I got a little bit more work to do, but I'm excited to get it done, so I'll see you next time.